Frank.
Dynamite.
Frank, come on, man.
Can I Be Frank is all about capturing real, authentic, unedited conversation. Please do consider supporting the process of podcasting and video making on Patreon or through PayPal. I will put some links in the description below. Thanks a mil. Hi, this is episode 43 with Ivor Cummins. Ivor Cummins is a chemical engineer turned health advocate. He's co-authored a book called Eat Rich, Live Long, and he speaks all around the world about the low carb, high fat diet and the positive implications that can have on your health. I've been particularly interested in this area because I suppose I've been trying to live a little bit healthier, trying to keep lean, and I was very lucky to stumble upon Ivor. He's a huge amount of videos online. If you're at all interested in losing weight and your overall health, this guy, he just really knows the stuff, and I find it very interesting, and so here it is.
And that is David Bobbitt, who is one of Ireland's most successful entrepreneurs. He runs and owns a $700 million business. And he started a charity called Irish Heart Disease Awareness Association, and that's who I work on behalf of. And he has a fixation with giving people the chance that he got 6 years ago at the age of 52, a chance to save his own life. So I'll also give another disclosure. We have a book out, myself and Dr. Gerber from Denver, a super doc, I think, and it goes through all of the science of health.
Maybe we should start from somewhere in the sense of the idea of a chemical engineer getting into this area. Now, so there's a bit of a description on your website, but maybe that's the starting point to kind of. And I might as well give a mention to Robert Kagan, who recommended. You don't know Robert, but Robert is in Canada, and he sent your video, one of your videos, to me. But he started in a totally different area, obviously.
Yeah, big time.
So what happened exactly that you would end up getting 30,000 subscribers on YouTube about this particular subject of health and heart disease and all that?
Yeah, are we going?
We're going there, yeah.
Okay.
We'll start with that. Well, I just kind of want to get a sense of I mean, it's a radical thing to... I think it's a radical thing to do, to go, given your background, to just... Obviously a part of your personality to maybe want to delve deeply into something like this, not just kind of on the surface look at something as most of us do.
Yeah, for sure, Frank. So my history is basically biochemical engineer originally, and I took the biochemical stream because I was kind of interested a little in that, but I didn't know how much. It turned out to be in third and fourth year in college for my engineering degree. The biochemistry of life was my favourite subject by a mile, so I really enjoyed it. But then I went into corporate world, process engineering and medical device manufacture, and I quickly found that my expertise, my special expertise, was as a problem solver, complex problem solver. And to what you said there, yeah, I like to go deep. I'm obsessed with mechanisms, and I love solving problems. I was a lifelong kind of technical person, even as a child, making bicycles from different parts and woodwork, everything. So long story short, I spent many, many years in corporate, medical device, then microfluidic devices, high volume. But what marked my career was getting more and more to be a leader in complex problem solving, eventually leading teams across 3 or 4 countries around the world in massive problems, multi-factor problems. So that was my thing.
Yeah.
That was my success. I went into management after around 15 years of that, moving higher and higher in the organizations. And I managed people for a further 15 years. But I also, when in that people management role over technical people, anytime a really major issue came up in the corporation, a worldwide technical problem with millions of dollars at stake, I would often, when it got bad enough, be called and have to drop my management role and take over all the teams to lead root cause resolution.
Right.
So yeah, that's always been my life, is solving problems, you know, deep stats, deep technical mechanisms, logical analysis, comparative analysis, all the elements of problem solving.
Yeah.
And then you would say, well, how did this happen? How did I become the biochemical engineer who is solving the problems of chronic disease, human health?
Yeah, exactly. So, but obviously that mind, that mind came into play, or that those characteristics that you were saying that about problems. Obviously, like if you hear a problem, you're not the type that just goes, somebody else will fix that. It's say that again, or tell me more.
Right, well that's it. When you get engaged in the problem, even if your bandwidth is limited and you know you maybe don't have time to spend on this, you're exactly right. What I do is I needs to know kind of person. So I get engaged. So I was always very busy. But what happened in 2012, I think it was late 12 coming into 13, I got some standard blood tests.
Yeah.
And a few of those measures, there were liver enzymes were high, certain ones. Ferritin, the iron loading in the blood, was extremely high. My cholesterol was apparently high. And the doctor I was seeing, they were only routine blood tests. There was nothing wrong with me at the time, supposedly. Kind of showed me the data, because I said, oh, well, what's high? And she said, oh, well, here, and explained. And I looked, and there's a lab reference range for all measures. So we'll take GGT, the liver enzyme I was high in.
Okay.
Which is very ominous, I soon found out, to be high.
That wouldn't mean nothing to me. Somebody'd have to explain to me why that's a problem.
It would be nothing to the vast majority.
Yeah.
And even to the doctor, it didn't mean a huge amount. But basically, you should be between 15 and 50, apparently.
Okay.
And I was over 100.
Right.
So I knew from my history, even though I wasn't sure what GGT was at that moment in time, I knew I'm way outside the normal range. And if this is a measurement that is done, it's done for a reason. And if I'm that far out, I don't know what it's about, but I know that is meaningful. That's really important. I just knew that.
Okay. Yeah. That's There's the average, and you're way above the average. I can get that too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or normal, and you were blowing normal out of the
out of the water, and that's the thing. So that may be acute, and my mind was whirring as the person was going through it, but I was thinking, right, okay, that's so far out. It could be acute and not too meaningful, but if it's persistent, that's really meaningful. They don't test this for no reason. And my ferritin was similar, way out, and my cholesterol was high. So long story short, the doctor really hadn't got much advice, because I always asked two questions when I'm brought into a problem, as I described earlier. I ask, right, okay, what are the implications of the problem? What's the size of the potential impact? And the second...
They hate to you come and then...
They're not too happy sometimes.
Most people just go, okay, yeah, fine, I'll eat less butter or something like that, you know what I mean?
Oh, well, yeah, and even in the engineering sphere, when I come along, you know, there's some hard questions are asked. But the key one is, what are the implications? What's the impact here? Potential impact, blah, blah, blah. And the second one is, what's your current status on root causes? Right? So, in other words, what is your logic on root causes? Where's your root cause diagram? Your Kepner-Trago analysis? I need to quickly get a picture. Does the team have a good grasp of root cause?
Okay.
Or are the team actually a little lost?
Right.
So I asked the same questions of the doctor.
They hate you, I'd say.
Well, I asked them nicely.
Yeah.
So I basically asked, well, what's the implications of, say, I stay high in these for morbidity, mortality?
Yeah.
You know, what's the beef? And the answer was kind of a bit vague. Oh, it's not good, and you know, liver disease, and So, okay, it was a bit vague. The second question is, well, what are the things that would drive this up? Because I figured I have a reasonable family history. I'm not a mutant. It's unlikely to be some genetic disease, because I got blood tests years before and they were always fine.
Yeah.
So I knew there's a special cause, what we call it.
Okay.
So I said, what are the causes in what I do or eat or anything that drives these things up?
Yeah.
And to my shock, I got very little answer. So it was just like when I go into a problem-solving team and they're in crisis and I get called in, and when that question about root cause comes up and I get evasive answers, lack of clarity, and they're supposedly working on this for the past 2 months, I know immediately, okay, back to the data.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to go back to the raw data
Right.
because clearly the team is not sure.
Yeah. So you don't trust your doctor?
Well, to be honest, I just thought...
You don't know your stuff, doctor, really?
Well, on this particular thing,
Yeah.
I don't know about anything else, maybe is fantastic. So I thought, okay. So I went to another doctor. And I got the same result.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, this is interesting. These are standard blood tests. And I got a repeat test 2 weeks later, and they're essentially still high, so they were persistent. Standard blood tests. And there's no clarity on what affects them. There were a couple of reasons given which turned out to be spurious, but nothing concrete. So I went to a third doctor.
Right.
So now you can see probably, like we talked about earlier, the way I am.
Yeah.
Like, not only do I need to know, but this is about my health and well-being. I have 5 children. I thought I was healthy. And now I'm looking at numbers here that really offend me. And I got to know. So after 3 doctors, I went myself and got a log on to ResearchGate and to PubMed.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to research these through the published scientific literature. Because if the 3 docs are not sure, there's no way I'm just going to pick up a book somewhere, because they've got a full medical training and they're not sure.
Yeah.
So I went and I researched ferritin GGT in the published science. And when I go through data and tape, I'm quick with that.
Are you?
So
I've tried to read some medical papers from time to time, and I just go, oh God, give me the summary, give me the top line headlines, please.
the abstract, the problem with the abstract I quickly found out was you can't really trust the abstract, the summary, because the summary can be like a root cause team that has their own ideas, but they're not actually entirely correct. And you need to look at the data. So I'd have to go to the appendices and see the raw data and make my own mind up.
Yeah.
But I found out within a few days, to my shock, that ferritin and GGT are 2 biomarkers that are far more worrying when they're high than, say, cholesterol.
Yeah.
And yet I had always heard about cholesterol, but I'd heard nothing about these. But the mortality curves for GGT are frankly shocking.
Okay.
If your GGT is in the top 5th of the population, there's dramatic extra risk for liver cancer, for diabetes, for cardiovascular disease. And I'm looking at these graphs. I get the data. I'm looking, these are a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm getting really shocked. Ferritin similarly. And if you're really, really high, super high risk. So I said, okay. So then I have to move to the next step. I know now my first question, how serious is this? Way more than the doctors were saying.
Yeah.
And the second question is, what are the root causes?
Okay.
Now, that got heavy.
So in my language, you're kind of reading, you're getting results, you've researched them, and you're seeing two or three things that if it continues this road, you're looking at disease. So you're looking at your health is in serious risk.
Yes, disease and absolutely also mortality. I got plenty of data very fast on the predictive power of these things for all-cause mortality, the big one, right? So I said, okay, this is crazy. And one thing was a very high GGT gives you maybe up to a 20 times risk of liver cancer.
Okay.
Right? So hepatic cancer and like these kinds of diseses are not good ones, right?
No,
these are not.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Particularly liver or pancreatic cancer. I mean, they're some of the most severe ones you can get. So I know now how serious it is, and I'm under no illusions. But then I have to go and root cause it.
Yes.
Now that was a big endeavor. I had my biochemical background. I had 30 years of complex problem solving. So I was in a massively great place to research the published literature. But still, obviously, there's a lot in it.
Yeah.
Within a few weeks, though, I had largely worked out that the ferritin being high was a sign of metabolic syndrome. The doctors weren't so aware of metabolic syndrome, which is also insulin resistance syndrome or hyperinsulin syndrome. And basically what it is, that the foods you're eating and the lifestyle you're following is leading to your pancreas releasing much more insulin than it should have to do.
Okay.
And when you release much more insulin provoked by your food and your lifestyle, right, because sleep and stress and many other factors, even sun exposure, can affect this problem, more insulin, you develop insulin resistance, where your body's tissues then begin to try and hold off the effects of insulin because you're driving something high that should not be so high. And in the sense, your body is delivering all this insulin to manage your blood glucose.
Okay.
Right? Because insulin manages blood glucose and lots of other things. But driving hyperinsulinemia in time, other parts of your body resist its action and you get insulin resistant.
Okay.
And the worst thing you can be for your longevity and health in later life is to be insulin resistant.
Right.
So I call it the elephant in the room.
Right.
It is the biggest thing in chronic disease or avoiding chronic disease and early death, but it's not really talked about it, hence it never even came up with the doctors.
Okay.
Now that's going to change in the next 10 years, but that's the way it was.
Right.
So long story short, once I discovered and got into that vein of insulin resistance metabolic syndrome, I was just like a ferret then. I just exploded out into the warrens of this massive disease process in the modern world. And then I was unstoppable.
Right.
Every evening after work, I would be locked in. More papers.
Yeah.
And I began to lecture on this in my corporation to the engineers and technicians, up to 100 at a time. And I translated the complexity into a simpler message and explained you can dramatically change your health and your longevity by just understanding all this stuff, you know?
See, most of us, and speaking for myself, I suppose, say like a car, unless there's something on the dashboard with a red light, I'm not really going to go and do the servicing because I just go, it'll be grand, right? And unless, the tyre breaks, then, or, there's a hole in the tyre, I won't get it fixed. Or somebody says, look, they're a bit worn, maybe you should think about getting them fixed. You just leave it. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, I would go for the once over, just because it was a bit of disease in my own family. And it's I kind of look at it as a checkup. But I never from the perspective of, unless something was glaring or I'm feeling really tired or something's wrong, I'm kind of happy enough to let it go. Whereas, so in other words, you were getting this information and you probably still felt okay, but the potential of something bad happened was enough for you to just dive deep into this. Is that...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And exactly like the work world, after decades that if you ignore signs, sometimes even subtle signs, you can end up with an enormous issue. And if you're shipping out 10 million units a month, and if you basically ignore subtle signals, small signals,
the potential
is enormous, because if you're making, say, 10 or 15 million units a month and shipping them, and 2 or 3 months after the problem has been building, you could have 50 million units warranty problem in the field. So the whole discipline of engineering is you can't ignore. And that's translated into, when I had my experience, there's no way I'm going to ignore these.
Yes.
But I understand what you're saying, that a lot of people do ignore small stuff, unless there's something clear and present danger. But the other thing is, if many doctors don't understand what I mentioned, insulin resistance, and how serious some of these signals are, then they in turn will not be highlighting to people, this is really serious.
Yeah.
Like happened to me, it was kind of like, they're a bit high, checked a couple of things, it's, it's stuff.
It's grand,
It's probably going to be grand. But your life's too important to take that attitude.
And that's it, like, even just, my doctor is fine, and he kind of said, your cholesterol's heading up there a little bit, but sure, look, it'll be grand for the next few years. Come back when you're, because I was saying, I think I should come here every year for a checkup, just as a thing to do. I might get my car checked up with that in mind. And he was kind of, I thought it was just interesting that he said something like, sure, if we have to put you on tablets, we'll do that later on. I just thought it was an interesting approach. And again, I didn't really think too much about it. He did suggest dietary changes, going more Mediterranean. But anyway, I'm going off the point. But it's just that kind of, he's not certain really either of things, and he's saying it'll be grand, she'll come back when, you know, if there's a problem then we'll deal with it with medication or whatever.
Right, which is a different approach, because by the time you have a genuine problem that's clear and present, you may have been damaging your body for 10, 20 years. And there are consequences for that. So you mentioned, like the car analogy, and it's a great one. A biologist once I was following said, you know, we are all machines. Highly complex machines, but machines nonetheless. And we are. And what you put in the machine, the fuel and the other conditions the machine is in, dictate whether there's a long-lived, you know, high-powered machine or a machine that falls apart, like many people are today, you know, in middle age. But I went with this knowledge in the early days and gave these seminars and work, and I explained to them what had happened to me. When I had root caused the problem, the hyperinsulinemia and myriad other things I won't get into that are related to that, I changed my diet utterly to a low-carb, high healthy fat diet. I didn't start doing more exercise. I had been doing a bit of running. I didn't change that. I only changed the diet. And I had every expectation instinctively, just from my prior history, that I should absolutely dramatically lower these markers. In 4 to 6 weeks even, I should. You know, I knew all the mechanisms, I'd worked everything out, and I knew that the body should respond in a dramatic way.
Okay.
Now, that's a big goal to set yourself for 6 weeks' time to get another set of tests and to have fixed all the markers. And that's exactly what happened.
Right.
So GGT collapsed like a stone, exactly as I knew it should, from understanding the pathophysiology and everything. The ferritin shot back down, right, into the normal range. I lost 30 pounds of weight, or 15 kilograms, which was almost like an aside.
Is that like 2 stones?
2 stones, approximately, yeah. I was
in 6 weeks?
Well, the 2 stones was 8 weeks. I did blood tests at 6 weeks, and again I did further ones at 8 or 9 weeks, and the weight was around 8.5, 9 weeks. Okay,
so then give me what you were eating typically beforehand, and then what's the low, you know, what's your typical kind of diet?
Right. My typical diet was, I was trying to eat healthy food pyramid, so plenty of healthy whole grains. I discovered, to my horror, afterwards, when I learned about the liver and insulin and everything else, I was drinking a lot of juice, orange juice. And it was fresh squeezed, it was good stuff. And I thought, this is like my 5 a day. So I liked it, and I drank a lot of it. So plenty of whole grains, whole wheat breads, sandwiches. I would have rice and pasta with my dinners. So I'd have a lot of
whole grains, that like breads.
Whole grain breads. Because back then, before I had a road to Damascus conversion, I actually did the research and understood it. I thought the whole grains, the orange juice, all this stuff was really healthy. And I ate it. In large amounts. And when I would go running and I'd come back in, I'd be ravenous. I'd eat a lot of bread, sandwiches, but it was always whole grain. It was good stuff. And pasta, like I say. I was also probably eating, you know, chocolate and stuff like that, and didn't think too much of it.
The goodie in the evening time with the cup of tea?
Yeah, that kind of thing. You know, not so much biscuits, because, you know, it was more chocolate in the evenings. Not a huge amount, but I would occasionally have pizzas as well. It wasn't like I had an amazingly good diet. When I discovered how important diet was, of course, I got rid of all of that. All those easily digestible starches. I mean, bread is basically, it's the ultimate modern ultra-processed food. Refined grains, pulverized, rapid release glucose. It's basically, bread is just bags of sugar. Right? And it also has modern vegetable oils in there as well, which are a dreadful affliction. So I cut out all the breads.
So you was kind of healthy. The odd,
on
you
the
know,
surface.
And like what weight?
I was around 95.5 kilos, which is pretty heavy. In stone,
it's probably like 14,
heading 15.
15, okay.
You know, but I had a fairly big build, and I didn't seem particularly fat. But you'd have the roundy face and the, you know, the padding all over, and the stomach, you know, and the kind of man boobs, I think they call them. You know, you have it all over, but not a big kind of huge belly, but heavy set. And when I went down to 80 kilos and under, it was obviously a dramatic transformation. I mean, you've probably seen my video. You said run on fat, and I'm quite different from the portly 95 kilo man.
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah.
But and
So for you that was the diet before, and so then you started day one of this new diet. What did that consist of then?
the new diet was switching to removing all of the high sugar carbs, starchy carbs. I took out most of the potatoes I was eating, the pasta went, all the breads essentially went.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, bread is pretty much pure glucose. And from what I understood now, it made no sense to put that into a person who was afflicted with essentially a carbohydrate intolerance is what I had.
Okay.
So I took out all of those, stopped the juice immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately. So that was all of what I took out. I had learned a bit about vegetable oils and how bad they can be. So we had just generic oils there. All of those were gone. And I had learned as well that processed food is stuffed with refined carbohydrates, which is the killer, and vegetable oils.
Okay.
So I took out a load of the processed food. We took out all the cereals from the pantry, right, all those cereals and, you know, morning breakfast cereals, all gone, all pure glucose, pretty much, with vegetable oils. So you can imagine the elimination was eliminating essentially all of the crap modern processed food.
Yeah.
And also pasta, potatoes and rice, because I knew I had a carbohydrate challenge, so I had to remove those as well. And what I replaced them with, healthy fats. So I began to eat grass-fed Irish fatty meats, which I'd used to avoid because I knew they would give you a heart attack.
Yeah.
Such a lie.
Certain, yeah.
Such a lie.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. I began to eat those. I eat more fatty fish.
So with, like, you're talking beef?
I would eat beef, but lamb was a particular favourite. Lamb has been referred to by knowledgeable people as land salmon, because lamb, especially if well raised, grass fed, is quite high omega-3, the good fats we get in salmon, and it's very fatty too.
Okay.
So it's not too lean and high in protein, which I didn't want too much protein. And so lamb, basically fish, the chicken as well, but with all the skin. Duck I was always fond of, so I began to eat more duck. So I would eat only twice a day, and I would eat basically meat and veg.
Yeah. So
Not-
broccoli,
cauliflower, non-starchy, non-high glucose veg. All the healthy veg, but I wouldn't be eating a lot of fruits like apples, bananas, which are modern bred for sweetness fruits with a lot of carb.
yeah.
So I would avoid those, and I'd go more for blueberries, strawberries, all the berry fruits that are really
Okay.
healthy, but they're very low sugar.
Yeah.
People might be surprised.
And mandarins?
Mandarins would be quite high in sugar and fructose, but occasionally eaten whole. The fibre in the oranges, when eaten whole, can slow the glucose or fructose release, and can be pretty okay, but I wouldn't go crazy on lots of oranges.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So,
Now-
go on, sorry, yeah.
But remember, what I was doing is I was doing an engineering intervention. I had discovered all I needed to know about the mechanisms, the pathways, and what the problem was. So I wasn't going to go in and take half measures. So I was going to be fairly extreme. Now,
Yeah.
I got extreme results by being extreme, but it's not to say to people that you can't have an orange. You know, that was a very severe implementation to get immediate results.
Yeah. Okay, so what's very interesting to me is that I think maybe probably was back in 2012, 2011, I did this, I was 15 stone, and I did this 2-week fat burning diet, right? And it was basically greens, no sugar whatsoever. No sugar whatsoever, and it was all fatty meats and oily everything, and probably in 2 weeks I lost a stone, more or less. Now it was horrendous. I found it horrendous, but especially for the first 5 days, I was so used to the goodies, so used to sugar. I couldn't get my head around not having it, but I just reached the point that either I was going to go from 15 stone up to 16 stone, or I'm going to go the other way. There was no way it was going to stay. I was going to stay the same, and so. But I kind of got the impression when I was doing it, oh, you couldn't keep this going. This is terrible for your heart, and you know this is going to cause you heart disease, right? And you know that you can only do it for that period of time. And then I went on to a kind of a lesser, you know, really high fat, kind of more medium, and fruits were reintroduced. And then maybe I lost another stone then over 4 weeks. So in a similar way, really, mine was more out of vanity, that I was just sluggish, tired with the kids, and I just thought, no, I need to make a change or I'm going the other way. But I had no science behind it, no anything, only from the people in the gym said it was a JUCO gym. They said, this will work. But I was still worried, and anybody I talked to, they go, "Jeez, you're going to get a heart attack. You can't keep that going, you know." So what's your obviously you have science behind that that's not going to cause you heart problems.
Yeah, absolutely, Frank. So that has been the biggest myth of the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So there may be people who have metabolic damage, who, you know, excessive animal fat and protein now because they've got a problem, like say diabetic problem or certain genetic types, may be sensitive to that. But overwhelmingly, for the human population, we evolved as hunter-gatherers. The most ideal human diet is very low in sugar and high glycemic, high sugar type carbs that raise your blood sugar. So you should eat healthy diets like I described. What you described there at the start was that would be a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Taking out all carbohydrate.
Yeah.
I don't believe people need that. It can be helpful for people who have diabetes or obesity. You know, they may be required to bring the carb very low. But generally, a healthy low carb diet with healthy fats is I would see as optimal.
And is there any healthy carbs then that are okay?
Well, the vegetables, unless you're allergic to certain vegetable or plant world matter, some people are at varying ones, but, you know, broccoli, cauliflower, you know, leafy greens, cabbages, above ground leafy greens of all types, and bean sprouts. There's just all of these low sugar vegetables, and people can look up any vegetable they want and find out, you know, what percentage of it is fiber and what percentage is pretty much sugar. And you stick to low sugar vegetables, above ground leafy vegetables is the best thing.
Can I ask you what the science is, I suppose, that say when you eat and you don't have a carbohydrate? Well, for me, I do get that feeling of empty, or that I'm just not full, and I need that, even though I need it and I don't want it, that clunk that the sandwich will give you, because I would feel that afterwards. But it's almost that you crave that. What is happening there that my body would crave that bit of toast and sandwich and all that? Like, now, even not white bread, I wouldn't eat white bread, but even the brown toast loaded with butter.
I am the same. So if I eat any bread now from out in a restaurant, the moment I touch it, all I think is more. My brain is screaming at me.
Yeah.
One of the reasons is that over evolution, you know, if you came across fruits or sweet things, they're particularly unlikely to poison you compared to, say, rancid meat or something else, bacteria. So we're programmed, we were always lacking generally in nutrition. So if you come across energy, particularly in the autumn, you know, before winter, and we have autumn fruits and sweet things available, you know, your body will be programmed to build some buffer for the future. It has to be. Your body over evolution was not programmed to worry about an obesity or diabetes epidemic, which we're now in the middle of due to our food supply. It never had to worry about that. It only had to worry about survival and getting through the winter. Yeah. So there's kind of a hard wiring that carbohydrates, particularly quick hit carbohydrates like you refer to, they have a form of addictive nature to them.
Yeah,
there's no doubt, and that's something we have to acknowledge. The reason I don't eat any bread now really is because as soon as I go near it, it screams more.
Yeah,
and I mean, you know what I say.
Get that butter out and lash it on.
You're in a restaurant and they bring out those kind of gourmet rolls.
Yeah,
and you say you'll have half of one with the warm butter.
Yeah. Not possible. Yeah.
Boom, gone. Next minute there's crumbs.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. And that's something we have to just accept. If you tailor a well-formulated low-carbohydrate diet with lots of delicious ancestral foods and get used to the nutrient dense fishes, meats, and all these kinds of things, or sausage that's properly made, not stuffed with carbohydrate, kind of grain fillers. And you eat the vegetables with the fibre. With it gives you more satiety and is much more a balanced meal we'd expect. Remember meat and 2 veg?
Yeah.
That was always the phrase.
Yeah.
So people 60, 70 years ago didn't say meat, 2 veg and a big pile of pure glucose in the form of rice.
Yeah.
Didn't say
Potatoes, a big pile of potatoes.
pile of potatoes, but you're right. You get potatoes or rice and cover them with sauces or fatty butter, and it is explosive.
Yeah.
And I think it's primarily a survival instinct, because there was never a problem in evolution of getting too fat and diabetic. It didn't happen. And we weren't really encoded for that. We were encoded to make sure we had enough nutrition, enough energy. Yeah.
So there obviously is an adjustment period, though, because let's just say I have tried, not that I've tried, because I know if I really put my mind to it, I absolutely could do it, but it's like bringing in a little bit of bread into your diet. It's just almost, it is addictive, because I just want it more and more. But so how do you, there is a phase, it must be a phase where you have to get through, because I read about fat adaptation from carbohydrate adaptation. How do you get from that, and how long does it take?
Okay, very good question. It varies, but usually for people, in my case and in many people's case, it's literally a few days to a week.
Okay.
That, when you initially, and just to briefly explain, so your body has enzymes to digest food and to do myriad different processes. And if you're eating a high carb and lower fat diet, your body is basically tooled up to process that carbohydrate. When you suddenly go to a low carb, high fat diet, your body has to go, right, we got to make a whole new array of fat burning enzymes. So, and it's quite a process. The nuclei in your body have every cell in your body has your full DNA, and in your DNA is all the encoding for all the proteins and enzymes you need.
Okay.
So what actually happens when you switch your diet is your body has to go back to the nucleus, get the encoding for the enzymes it needs more of, and start making them by the millions and billions. So during that process, you're set up to be a carb burner, and suddenly you're putting a different fuel ratio completely into the mix, like diesel into a petrol engine. And there is a period that varies for people where you adapt. And the adaptation is basically all your body's tissues and these enzymes need to be made in big supply to process fat foods. And then what will fall away are the machinery that processed carb. And that's a transition.
Okay.
And during the transition, it's called the low carb or keto flu. People can feel loss of energy. They can feel irritable. One common problem is that people are not getting enough magnesium and potassium and salt.
Salt, yeah.
Yeah, because carbohydrate foods often bring reasonable amounts of those. And when you suddenly go to a high fat diet, you have a lot of water loss. You can go lower in salts, and that can make you feel fluey and not so well. Cravings are another problem, that the sudden change to the machine can leave your body spike a response of asking for, hey, I want my old stuff back. And cravings are going to be a challenge, like giving up smoking.
Yeah.
But the key is to understand
That's
what I
what's
just
happening.
said, and that's what's happening. And in understanding, it makes it vastly easier.
Yeah. Because then if I take it that last year I was training for a marathon, and I've watched Run on Fat in the last couple of weeks, or since you replied to me on email, but last year I did it, and then I can't remember the sequence of events, but I decided to go on the fat burning, and I think I had a long run on a Saturday. I went out on the Saturday morning. I had eggs and bacon for my breakfast before I went out. That was it. So I felt kind of empty going out, and I went out running, and at a certain point I kept going, and I made it all the way home, but at a certain point I went, okay, there's something wrong here. This is not good. I came home, I was physically ill from the run, and I think once I recovered from that, I came downstairs and I had ate a half a loaf of bread.
Classic.
So, is it classic? Yeah,
That's
good.
what I used to do.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about sports performance, when I was talking there, it's mainly about ordinary people to get healthier for longevity and lack of disease. Sporting is interesting. The world record holder, I think, for the 100-mile run now, Zach Bitter, or at least he's a record holder, and many more endurance athletes are going absolutely this way.
Yes.
They're becoming fat burners.
Yeah.
Now, they still do take carb prior to a race and some replete afterwards.
Yeah.
So for sporting performance, if people think of it that your fat tissue, if you become a fat burner, you've got maybe 100,000 calories waiting to be burned.
Yeah.
If you're a great fat burner during steady endurance running, you will be able to burn that at twice the rate of a person who's not fat adapted.
Yeah.
That's great. But you've also got glycogen, which is kind of like a carb or sugar based energy store, and that has around 2,000 calories.
Okay.
So if you're going to perform in sport, often the strategy is to kind of fill up your glycogen before you run. And you can pull from that rapid access, like for sprinters need to use glycogen.
Okay.
You know, fat burning is more slow and steady. It's a better way to live, but it's slower and steady for endurance sports.
Right.
If you're going to run really hard, the way I describe it is kind of fill up your glycogen battery with carb in advance.
Like porridge? Oats?
Like stuff like that. And again, I'm not a big sporting person, but this is generally how it works. And then you can be drawing from your glycogen, while also, because you're a fat adapted person, and in athletes they've done this, low carb, high fat, long term athletes can burn fat at twice the rate per minute, their body fat, than their high carb colleagues.
Okay.
The graphs are stunning. They used to think that 1 gram per minute was the absolute human maximum. The belief for decades in sporting history and sporting physiology was that humans can get up to 0.8, 0.9 grams per minute fat burning from their body fat, and they're also, of course, using their glycogen. And as you run further, you deplete your glycogen sugar stores and you have to burn more fat, but you're limited to around 0.9 grams. Now athletes who are fat adapted, low carb diets, low carb trainers, they have shown they can get up to 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 grams per minute fat burning.
Okay.
That's changing the sport. But if we get back to how you feel, unless you're fully fat adapted, and it may take months for a sports person,
Right.
you're not going to really have that amazing fat burning during performance. And if you're used to having a full glycogen battery, I call it, and then you go pretty suddenly down to having depleted glycogen and running hard,
Yeah.
your
Okay.
body's going to get a bit of a disturbance.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not to be taken lightly for sports people. For ordinary people who want to live longer, be healthier, resolve their cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all of these modern chronic diseases, a healthy low carb, high healthy fat diet, fantastic. But for the sports people, you'd need to delve into it more and get your own strategy.
Yeah, fine.
You know,
Okay.
it's a specific application.
Yeah.
And I've described it briefly, but it's kind of specialized. And different people will, for sporting performance, find different things work better for them. You know, they're tuning and honing.
Yeah. Okay. So then, getting back to the kind of ordinary daily living, and I suppose to try and kind of for me to understand a bit better about this, this big myth that by eating more fats, healthy fats, that you're still, or fats, let's just call them fats, because healthy is what we'll get to. But this idea of eating way more meat and vegetables and no potatoes, rice, or taking that out of your diet, still there is that view, heart disease, right? So how did that come about? Because that was rock solid. You're going to get heart disease now if you continue eating that sort of diet,
Yeah, and initially when I began to research this, it was around at least 2 whole weeks before I realised that was completely misleading, to the point of being essentially a lie. But it wasn't malicious. They mixed things up very badly in the 50s and 60s and 80s or 70s, and I know this can happen as well in complex problems. People get misled by correlations. The shortest version is essentially they knew cholesterol related to heart disease. Higher cholesterol or bad cholesterol generally tracked with higher heart disease. Now that doesn't prove it causes it. It's just an association.
Okay.
So it's a correlation. And we know in engineering, you can never ever, if you see a correlation between two things, it could mean one is driving the other, or it could mean one is connected to something else indirectly that drives the other.
Right.
So you could be really careful. But anyway, the whole world fell in love with the cholesterol was causing the heart disease, and it was the big thing. Now, heart disease exploded in the 19th and 20th centuries. Absolutely exploded. To be honest, the cholesterol didn't really change. That's been around for millions of years. It's a crucial molecule, you know, and the system that transports it around the body, the lipoprotein system, LDL is low density lipoprotein, carries cholesterol. It was a very exotic system, but that's been around forever. But the heart disease has exploded. It's not really the cholesterol, it's what disturbs and destroys your cholesterol transport system. So they were kind of half right, something to do with cholesterol. But when they firmly believed that cholesterol was the big problem, they also began to learn that if you ate fat, and saturated fat particularly, it could in some people tend to raise the cholesterol. So now you can see how remote we are getting away from the true mechanisms. We've got correlations and associations going back from cholesterol back to fat. But Ansel Keys, a researcher in the 60s and 70s, became a huge name in heart disease. And he did the 6 and 7 country study. It was only correlations, and we know now they didn't really mean anything. But compelling graphs were shown between the consumption of fat and heart disease rates for different countries.
Okay.
And once that began to happen, and he was an extremely charismatic individual, he had membership of the American Heart Association. I think he got on the board, and the whole world, America and then the world, just followed that this is it. Higher cholesterol caused by higher fat is what's driving heart disease. It was a mistake, because we know now from the studies since then that it was only a correlation, and really you can get many correlations in other studies where higher fat means lower heart disease. So it was all kind of noise, statistical noise and associations. In fact, France has the highest saturated fat consumption, around 15%, double America at that time, and they had a third of the heart disease. So it's like any engineer coming in would look at the graph and say, but hold on a sec, there's so many directly opposing correlations that say the opposite. You don't go public with this, you're going to make a fool of yourself. But they got away with it because everyone rolled with it.
Did I hear you saying something about not today, but in one of your videos, about 52% of people in America are pre-diabetic? Is that something like that, right?
It's 52% in a recent study of American adults are pre-diabetic or full diabetic.
Wow.
The number I would say is higher because that was only looking at their glucose, but if you look at their blood insulin, you'll find people at earlier stage.
And is it in really simple terms, it's because they put sugar in everything? Is it not so simple as that? Like, even their bread, there's definitely sugar in their bread. It's just everything, it seems, no?
It's not as simple as carbs cause but diabetes on their own. It's a little more nuanced. So I would say from the current research, no one has ever done a trial to prove this. So a randomized human trial to prove what I'm going to say, but all of the mechanistic data and all of the associational data and basically everything we see when you implement the right diets in people's blood markers, I would say that sugar and refined carb combined with vegetable oils, modern man-made fats, and ultra-processed food generally, which contains both. If you eliminated all of what I just said, all of that stuff, your population would find it extremely hard to get diabetic, never mind become an epidemic.
Right.
So I'd say the combination of sugar, refined carbs and vegetable oils would be the big triad to absolutely avoid, if you don't want a diabetes diagnosis, type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is much rarer, it's autoimmune, it's different, but the type 2 modern diet and lifestyle diabetes. And I'll throw in one more figure, that the very latest data I have is that around 64% of over 45s in America, adults, are now pre-diabetic or diabetic. And myself and Dr. Gerber, my co-author, with our book Eat Rich, Live Long, which explains all of this, we reckon from his practice and my research and the data, probably 75% of over 45s are essentially diabetic if you measured insulin properly. So we have a situation now where by hook or by crook, we have America, and Ireland will be behind us, but moving along to catch up. We have the majority of our adults now share a common pathology, a common disease state. It is type 2 diabetes. You can also call it insulin resistance syndrome that I mentioned at the start. You can also call it hyperinsulinemia syndrome. You can also call it metabolic syndrome. In other words, most of our population now suffer from a disease process that is the biggest single driver, we know from the research, of most modern chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease, many cancers, sleep apnea. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is kind of an epidemic too. That's the hyperinsulinemia disease of the women. And prostate enlargement is the hyperinsulinemia disease of the men. It's a great sign for that. So it's the PCOS of the men, it's being called. Alzheimer's is now being called, quite rightly in my mind, type 3 diabetes. Okay. And I've even heard Parkinson's in one paper referred to as type 4 diabetes. So what people need to understand is you don't need to know a huge amount up front. Beyond that, the hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance problem, which you'll see in high blood glucose, high blood insulin, high GGT, high ferritin, and many other markers, or your cholesterol ratios tell you you've got this problem. That's how cholesterol's connected. Long story short, if most modern people have this one common disease process, it's the one common disease process that everyone should be talking about. And I learned that after a few weeks research 6 years ago. I don't want to blow my trumpet here, but I just did because I became obsessed, and that's my.
Well, you can tell, yeah. I mean,
I still am. I still have to pinch myself, Frank. Even now, when I see these stats, I stop for a moment, and after 6 years of deep research and speaking all over the world on this, you'd think I'd be taking it for granted. But I still suddenly think, this is insane. It's so insane what I described there that 6 years into this, it still strikes me sometimes. Boom.
Well, so one way or another, then this is going to it sounds like it could be a bit of an epidemic. Then in the next 10 years, like you did say that actually, that this will manifest then one way or another.
It's already manifested for anyone who has a clue about what's happening and reads the literature or the stats I mentioned. But it will become more and more unavoidable in the coming years. The emerging developing nations, China now has a diabetes type 2 crisis. America's had it for a long time. The amputations of limbs in India, they have a massive diabetes crisis. With the poor, of course, they're taking all the refined sugar and sugary drinks now, and they have vegetable oils. India's awash with vegetable oils, so is China. So Brazil now has a diabetes, I think one of the highest rising rates of diabetes in the last 20 years in the world. They started off at flat nothing, and they're just going through the roof. Massive sugary drink consumption. Saudi Arabia, I know Saudi Arabian doctors. In fact, I have colleagues, doctors all around the world in my network in all of these countries. They're all saying the same thing. They're saying it's Armageddon. It's insane. So yeah, we are in the tsunami of chronic disease based on the processes I described. And we're going to have to address them. And they are being addressed. Virta Health in America now, actually it was the billionaire in the Run on Fat film, has funded and built a startup, and they are applying very low carb ketogenic diet to people with type 2 diabetes, and their results are stunning, exactly like I experienced years ago. They have 60% reversed their diabetes. Essentially their blood glucose now says they're not diabetic after a year. 60% of type 2 diabetics, and the medical system believes that's a chronic progressive disease. Never goes back, always goes forwards. 60% reversed essentially, or in remission. 90% reduced or eliminated all their medications. in a year. And this is happening. There are papers and trials all over the world saying this, but they're not getting into the media. So that is the gap. So the big gap in dealing with this tsunami is, how do you get everyone to be cognizant of what I described about hyperinsulinemia and this problem in the same way that they all knew about fat and cholesterol 20 years ago? How do you... And you need mass media for that.
Yeah, you do, and then you obviously have a huge, and this is a different conversation entirely, but you have a huge pharmaceutical industry that is not really vested in that, arguably. I mean, then we're getting a little bit conspiracy theory, but I mean, if your business is people who are sick and you've loads of healthy people, you don't have a business.
Yeah.
Whatever way you want to look at it.
Yeah, true. And the irony is I'm such a tech head and an anti-conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I hate those kind of phrases, but you have to say them, because for me, I'm a corporate guy for 10, 20, well, actually 30 years. And the reality is that this is just business. So it's not actually conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory is when you think, like the church has got these secret operatives, or the Masons, or maybe
Area 51.
Yeah, whatever. And the Twin Towers, the FBI did an inside job. These are all things that don't marry with the data. But the thing about this is, it's not really conspiracy. It's just a natural evolution of the modern business capitalist society. Yeah. That the system which has money that can pay for research and pay for messages will always lean towards funding what helps itself.
Yeah.
And for decades now, pharmaceutical have been funding heavily into medical education of doctors. They're obviously involved in all of the trials. They're engaged with every part of the medical system. We also have the food companies, the ultra-processed food companies, which are behemoths in the world. And they are funding a ton of science as well. And you can figure out what the science might be saying. And it does say, oh, sugar doesn't seem to be as bad as we thought. And, oh, processed grains, we did an experiment, we don't see a major problem. So the biggest industries in the world, food and pharma, are just in the position of the last 50 years that the cholesterol and fat theory is a massive boon for them. And what I described, the refined carb, sugar, seed oils and processed foods are the problem, is a massive business impact if that became the norm.
Yeah.
Because everyone would get... We've talked about Verta, myself, and I have testimonials, and my colleagues around the world. We have people all over the world losing 50, 60 pounds. Their bloods are transforming. They're literally transforming themselves. Imagine everybody applied this formula that we just discussed properly. The medications market would I mean, Wall Street would be furious. And the food companies would have...
And I've always... We were kind of talked a little bit... I looked into the medicinal mushroom thing last year, and what I came away from the whole thing was that I felt within our grasp our multiplicity of things that are free, that are so easy to do and change, that if you were to do all those things first before you started taking vitamins and whatever, if you did all the kind of free things first, you've 95%. The machine is going to work to 95% of its... Maybe you can get an extra 5% from all these other nutrients and these vitamins and all that, maybe that, but there is 95% of the body that can be sorted with free things, with easy access things.
In principle, yes, I would agree, and I always refer to the Pareto Principle, the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Do 20% of the stuff that you could do to fix a problem or help, but if it's the right top 20%, you'll get 80% of the result.
Yeah.
Rough and tough. So I would say, if you go to the core of it, if everyone who is interested in their health eliminated sugars, refined carbs and seed oils, these industrial, I've heard it called runoff from an industrial settling tank, these vegetable oils and seed oils that are everywhere and in every food, if people eliminated those, the processed foods, refined carb and sugars, just did that would be a kind of a 20-80. I mean, that would be an enormous impact on your health alone. And then if you add in more things, of course, exercise is very good. Some people are never really going to do much of it, but that's good. And there are a handful of really cheap non-fancy vitamins and minerals like magnesium and potassium. You can get it in bulk form and just mix it with food, and they are very important elements, and most people are magnesium deficient nowadays, and it is actually important. But there is, like in our book, we go through the list of minerals and vitamins, what they are, which ones are more important, and they're not like buying someone's branded nutraceuticals.
Yeah.
I give one little example. Cod liver oil is full of really important components for a human body. It's fantastic. If you don't like fish, cod liver oil will kind of give you some of the benefits.
Yeah, okay.
But if you buy the pills of omega-3 capsules, I worked out from looking at the back of a packet, and this 7C's cod liver oil, high strength, good stuff, well made. The pills are 10 times the cost per unit of omega-3.
Yeah.
Now imagine 10 times the cost. So there are smart choices to be made. Old-fashioned cod liver oil, 10 times cheaper than buying the pills. Most people are buying the pills, and that's marketing. Oh, you're a marketing guy.
That's me. And I think you see as well that what we like the most is, and we all is this idea that it's easy. It's like I'd buy the nice runners, and I'd buy my nice Garmin watch, and sure, that'll do the running for me. And I looked like that, but it won't do the running for you. But I was going to ask you one, because actually I could talk to you for another few hours.
We could do another hour.
Yeah, I think we should do another one when you get back, maybe from your world tour. I was going to ask you about intermittent fasting. What's your sense of intermittent fasting? I think it's very good, intermittent fasting.
I love it. In fact, to be honest, if someone said to me now you can't do intermittent fasting from tomorrow, I'd actually really I'd be clammy. That would really upset me, because I see it as a central tool. In short, intermittent fasting, myself and Dr. Gerber, my co-author, like to call it meal skipping.
Yeah.
Rather than having all exotic things to do, just keep it simple. Just skip the occasional meal until you become fat adapted and used to fasting. If you're on a high carb food pyramid diet and you try and suddenly just skip some meals, you're going to feel like crap, right? You skip a lunch in the afternoon, you got brain fog. Just to show how dramatic the results are, because I'm fat adapted and fasting adapted, the exact opposite happens. So I say this sometimes to people. If I've got a big stage appearance, say 600 people, and I'm speaking for an hour and I need to be at my best, the previous 24 hours I eat nothing.
Yeah,
I go in there 20.
Now.
That is high performance. I see it as a performance drug. And what basically happens when you're fat adapted, fasting adapted, when you're not eating, your stomach feels kind of hollow. There's a little feeling, but you can ignore the signal. You feel edgier, sharper. You feel alive.
Yeah, I totally agree with that now.
It's so super.
Yeah.
But people, and I have to say again, if you are eating a food pyramid high carb diet with your pasta, your rice and your some veggies and a bit of meat, and you're eating the standard higher carb diet, you can't do it. You must first get fat adapted, lower carb diet for a couple of weeks, level things out, maybe take your magnesium, potassium, sodium supplements because you might have an adaptation period. But once you're leveled out, you can start turning on the fasting lever or lever. And wow, that is a hell of a tool. It's number 4 in our 10 top levers or tools in the book. In short, it's amazing. And the people talk about, I love this paper came out a couple of months ago. The neurological benefits of exercise are known and accepted by the world of science and everyone. Exercise gives neurological and many other benefits. A recent study showed that one of the reasons it does is because exercise, like fasting, lowers your glucose and raises your beta hydroxybutyrate, BHB. And when you're fasting or when you've exercised, your brain gets fueled by BHB more so than just glucose. And they have tied the mechanisms of brain neurological benefits from exercise to this active fuel, and it's also a signaling molecule, BHB, and that's what you get from fasting. So I always knew years ago that fasting is the exercise you do without moving. But in recent years I've got more and more papers around why. and the mechanisms. It's lower glucose, lower insulin, higher BHB, and many other mechanisms are similar when you're fasting as to when you're exercising. It ties together.
I mean, yeah, and from my experience of it, it is. You talked about that edginess. After there's the feeling of the hollowness, because I probably did it on more carbs, and then I just go like that on it. It was tough, but I still kind of like that. The discomfort almost is alive. It's almost that feeling of I'm sharper. Now I can't be in the kitchen watching all the food cooking or anything like that. I'd be working away furiously. But my focus and attention span and alertness and decision making, all those things, I'm way more confident in their accuracy as opposed to did I make the right decision there or whatever. Whereas on that it's very interesting. Shit, look, I'm going to stop this because we've got so much, but hopefully I get you back because it's really, really interesting stuff. Thank you so much.
And thanks a lot. Looking forward to
it. Hi, if you like the conversation that I just had and you'd like more, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you.
Frank, come on, man.